case of Kirti Vyas. Kirti Vyas, a 28-year-old resident of Mumbai, lived with her family in a Bharatnagar residence on Grand Road. After completing her education, she worked in the finance department at a famous beauty salon in Andheri West, Mumbai. On March 16, 2018, Kirti followed her daily routine, leaving her house at 7 a.m. to head to the office. Her two friends were already waiting for her in their car, and together they drove to work. However, Kirti failed to return home that evening, and her family was unable to contact her as her phone was switched off. Concerned, they reported her disappearance to the police. Despite an extensive 50-day search, there was no trace of Kirti. It wasn't until the police conducted a thorough investigation that they found a crucial clue, a drop of blood, which ultimately led them to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. Kirti's family members were busy with their tasks when, around 11:30 a.m., her mother tried to contact her to ask for the Wi-Fi password at home. However, she couldn't reach Kirti because both of her mobile phones were switched off. Assuming Kirti was busy at work, her mother thought she had turned off her phones and focused on her own tasks. Later that evening, Kirti's family grew worried when she didn't come home on time. They called her office and were surprised to learn that Kirti hadn't come to work that day and her phone was consistently switched off. Distressed, they contacted Kirti's close friends, who said they had last spoken to her the previous night. The family then began searching for Kirti in the vicinity, but despite their efforts, her whereabouts remained unknown. The entire night passes, but Kirti fails to return home. The following day, overcome with exhaustion and defeat, Kirti's family files a report of her disappearance at the DB Road police station. After registering the case, the police investigation team visits Kirti's office to gather information about her. They also question her friends. During the interrogation, two of Kirti's friends, Tamna and Kushi Sahajwani, informed the police that they dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station on the day she went missing, as per her request, while they were driving her to the office. To verify their statements, the police examined the CCTV footage outside Kirti's house. The footage clearly shows Kirti leaving her house around 9 a.m. on the morning of March 16, 2018. Tamna and Kushi Sahani were already waiting with their car, and Kirti gets in. They then drive away. Since this was the last time Kirti was seen with her friends, the police asked Tamna and Kushi Sahani to join the investigation team and provide any information they have about Kirti, no matter how small, and details about the events of March 16, 2018. The 28-year-old finance manager, Kirti, has disappeared, and the Mumbai police have yet to uncover any clues about her whereabouts. She was last spotted outside her building, getting into an SUV owned by her colleague. According to her colleague, he dropped her off at Lamington Road. As Kirti was last seen with Siddesh and Kushi, the police initially suspected their involvement in her disappearance. Both have been cooperative with the authorities, assisting in the investigation. Despite days of scrutiny, the police have found no evidence to implicate them. In fact, Siddesh and Kushi have even launched social media campaigns on Facebook and Twitter to help locate Kirti. As a result, the police have cleared them of any suspicion. However, the police are still faced with a daunting task of finding Kirti, whose disappearance remains a mystery. The crime branch had already verified CCTV footage outside Kirti's home, which confirmed that Siddesh and Kushi gave Kirti a lift in their car heading towards the office. However, they claimed to have dropped Kirti near Grand Road Station, but the CCTV footage around that area had not been checked earlier. The crime branch then immediately began scrutinizing the CCTV footage around the station. Additionally, they investigated the CCTV footage from Siddesh Tamana and Kushi Sahajwani's car. A surprising revelation emerged. Neither Kushi, Siddesh, nor Kirti appeared in any CCTV footage around or at the station. Moreover, the CCTV in Siddesh Tamana's car did not confirm that they went towards the station on March 16, 2018. When questioned by the crime branch, Siddesh and Kushi initially claimed to have dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station, but the CCTV evidence contradicted their statement. Later, they changed their story, saying that Kirti had initially asked to be dropped at the station, but then requested to get down near Navjivan Society, which is why they did not reach the station. The prime suspects had repeatedly changed their statements, arousing the policeman's suspicion. As a result, they kept a close eye on both of them. In addition to this, their phone records were checked, but nothing suspicious was found. Consequently, both individuals remained at large for nearly 50 days. Despite Kirti's disappearance without a trace, it seemed as though there would be no leads on their whereabouts. However, the police received a forensic report that completely altered the course of the case. It was discovered that when Kushi, Siddesh, and Kirti were last seen leaving the office on March 16, 2018, the police had immediately sent the car they used for forensic examination. The forensic lab's report revealed that a drop of blood was found in the car's trunk. After subjecting this drop of blood to a DNA test and matching it with a sample from Kirti's parents, it was confirmed that the blood found in the car belonged to Kirti. The presence of Kirti's blood in the car was now revealing a lot. After this revelation, the police take Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani into custody again and begin a rigorous interrogation. Both of them initially claim that they dropped Kirti off on the way and do not know her whereabouts. However, when the police confront them about a drop of Kirti's blood found in the car's trunk, they are unable to provide a clear explanation. Under intense questioning, they eventually crack and start revealing the truth. The truth is shocking. It emerges that KY worked as a finance manager at B. Blunt Salon, while Kushi Sahajwani was Kirti's junior, and Siddesh Tamanar worked as an account executive. Siddesh Tamanar had been employed at the salon for a long time, with decent performance, but had been failing to meet his targets for the past few months, accompanied by continuous errors in his work. As a result, Kirti issues a notice to Siddesh Tamanar, warning him to either improve his performance by March 16, 2018, or face termination. In this notice, Siddesh Tamanar, 28, informs his colleague, 42-year-old Kushi Sahajwani, who works with him. Unbeknownst to others, a romantic relationship had developed between Kushi and Siddesh at the office, despite Kushi being already married. When Kirti issued the notice to Siddesh, Kushi became fearful that she would also lose her job, since Siddesh had failed to improve his performance in March. In response, Kushi and Siddesh concoct a sinister plan. They call Kirti and ask her to meet them at the office, and instead of taking the train, Kirti gets into their EOS sports car. En route, they demand that Kirti not terminate Siddesh's employment. But Kirti responds that the decision would be made at the office meeting. When they don't get their way, the two start physically fighting with Kirti inside the car. During the struggle, Siddesh and Kushi use a scarf to strangle Kirti, keeping her restrained for an extended period, ultimately resulting in her death inside the car. After Kirti's death, the two concoct a plan to discreetly dispose of the body, making it seem like nothing is amiss. They install a sunroof in the car, placing Kirti's body inside, and then head to the office. Upon their return, they drive the car to a secluded area, where they dismember Kirti's body into 3 pieces, all within the vehicle. They subsequently dispose of the pieces in different locations. After securing the evidence, they visit a nearby car wash to thoroughly clean their vehicle, inside and out. From there, they proceed to Kirti's house, where they join forces with her family to stage a search effort, thereby avoiding suspicion. Siddesh and Kushi even launch an online campaign to find Kirti and personally visit the police, ensuring that no doubts are raised. Despite their confidence in evading detection, their luck takes a dramatic turn when the car cleaner's negligence leaves behind a trace of Kirti's blood in the trunk, ultimately exposing the entire incident. Following the full disclosure, Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani are charged with severe offenses, including kidnapping, misleading the police, destroying evidence, and murder. They are subsequently arrested and imprisoned. Currently, regarding the status of this case, Kushi Sahajwani has been released on bail, while Siddesh Tamana remains behind bars. The police have yet to recover Katie's remains. As the Mumbai crime branch continues to search for the body of 28-year-old Kirti Vas, who was murdered on March 16th, they suspect that the body might have been dumped in the area. The search operation is ongoing. The case of Marilyn Levesque. In the year 2020, the body of 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque was discovered with multiple stab wounds, sparking a massive public outcry. The community was outraged, demanding that Canadian authorities provide an explanation for how such a heinous crime could have occurred. Marilyn was born in 1997 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, to Corinne Levesque and François Goulet, who separated soon after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Marilyn grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. She left her hometown for Quebec City at the age of 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the two cities, working in Quebec City 2 or 3 days a week and taking the bus or carpool services since she didn't have a driver's license. By early 2020, Marilyn was living with her new boyfriend, Gabriel Truchon, in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec City. Gabriel said Marilyn dreamed of a stable life and wanted to pursue a career in architecture. Tragically, on January 22, 2020, everything changed. Marilyn was in Quebec City for work, while Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At around 9 p.m., Gabriel became worried when he couldn't reach Marilyn after several attempts to contact her. He then texted her co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. The caller, identifying himself as a police officer, told Gabriel that Marilyn had been found dead. Forensic experts later determined that she died from multiple stab wounds, with more than 50 wounds on her body. To continue with Marilyn's story, let's go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Deschênes, a 32-year-old bartender at a Quebec hotel, met Eustachio Gallès, her 36-year-old boss, who oversaw the hotel's guest meals. Soon after, Chantal and Eustachio started a passionate romance. At the time, Chantal was a single mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, whose fathers she had not lived with for several years. Eustachio, on the other hand, had been married to Joanne Lafront since 1996 and had 3 children with her. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by instances of physical violence. For instance, Eustachio would occasionally smash walls in their home during fits of anger. On one occasion, while traveling through Ottawa, he assaulted his wife and was arrested, spending 7 days in jail. Despite these incidents and other forms of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafront claimed she wasn't afraid of her husband, describing him as a good father to their children, although his demanding job often kept him from spending time with the family. When Eustachio began his romance with Chantal, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children to move in with his new love. The whirlwind relationship was soon formalized, and Chantal and Eustachio got married. At first, everything seemed perfect for the couple, as is often the case. Eustachio got along great with Chantal's kids, and they spent their weekends together, going to the movies, skating, and enjoying other activities. However, the relationship began to unravel as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, Eustachio was working over 60 hours a week as the food and beverage manager at the hotel. He warned his supervisors he would quit on December 31st, 2004, due to the unbearable job pressures, but he didn't confide in his employer about his personal struggles. Eustachio Gallese and Chantal Deschênes had a highly complex and often volatile relationship. According to recent accounts from witnesses, Gallese was intensely jealous, while others claimed that both partners were possessive and frequently argued about it. Friends close to the couple revealed that Gallese would sometimes shout, but never physically harmed Chen, who would often retaliate by insulting or even slapping him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's two daughters were still asleep, having spent the evening with Joanie Heon, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Joanie learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Gales went to his ex-wife Joanna LaFrance's home to drop off his cash savings. While there, he called the police and confessed to killing his wife, Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanna's home, where Gales repeated his confession and surrendered. Gales urged the police to hurry to the school before Chantal's two daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. Meanwhile, the police went to Chantal's home, where they found her bloody body on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, they found two blood-stained knives and a broken hammer. An autopsy revealed that Chantal died from multiple hammer blows and stab wounds. The hammer blows were so brutal that the handle broke. In 2006, a jury found Gales guilty of second-degree murder during his trial. He admitted that he killed Chantal because she had decided to leave him. Gales was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Gales had a history of violent behavior towards his partners. In 1997, he was jailed for 7 days for assaulting his first wife, Joanne LaFrance. Tragically, he went on to kill his second wife, Chantal Dechaine, in 2004. This pattern of behavior suggests that Gales had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this disturbing history, the parole board to release him in March 2019, concluding that his risk of reoffending was low. As a condition of his parole, Gales was permitted to date women to meet his sexual needs, but with strict limitations. His parole officer set rules for his interactions with women, allowing him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month, but prohibiting romantic relationships. Additionally, he was required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, Gales struggled to abide by these rules, frequently visiting the massage parlor several times a week instead of just once a month. In March 2019, Gales was released. Later, in June, the 51-year-old visited an erotic massage parlor where he met 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque, an employee. Although Marilyn's family knew she earned a living by providing intimate services, she rarely discussed it with them, and when she did, it was often in a light-hearted or joking manner. Those close to her described her as sensitive. However, she had become rigid about her job, and her relatives believed part of her wanted to change her life and quit. Yet, it's not easy to revert to minimum wage after becoming accustomed to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in just 2 hours. How did Marilyn end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is certain: her childhood was difficult. She was placed in foster homes repeatedly. Marilyn's boyfriend and close friends were aware of her workplace and the nature of her job. According to a friend, Marilyn didn't have conflicting feelings about her profession. She openly discussed it without pride or shame. Since she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home, her boyfriend didn't object to her occupation. Gales, who was largely left to his own devices, began visiting a massage parlor multiple times a week. Although he seemed reformed to the parole board, his fundamental nature remained unchanged. On several occasions, he became violent towards female employees, resulting in him being banned from the establishment. Unbeknownst to the staff, Gales was a convicted criminal who had served time in prison for murdering his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was discovered that Gales had assaulted multiple women at a massage parlor, the parole board prohibited him from visiting erotic massage parlors, warning him that he would face imprisonment if he didn't comply. However, by then, Galassi had developed romantic feelings for Marilyn and found a way to bypass the rules. He offered her $1,300 Canadian to meet him in a hotel room, which she accepted. This was their first encounter outside of a massage parlor, and it happened without any issues. Galassi felt deeply sympathetic towards Marilyn, so he started opening up to her about his emotional struggles. He shared with her how much he still missed his late wife, whom he had mourned for 15 years, but he didn't reveal that he was responsible for her death. After this, Galassi began to sense that Marilyn was distancing herself from him, and their connection was deteriorating. He felt rejected, which sparked anxiety and jealousy within him. Galassi scheduled another hotel meeting with Marilyn for January 22, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend that she generally avoided hotel meetings, preferring massage parlors instead, as they had guards to protect the workers from potential issues and to escort troublesome clients out. However, the attractive offer of $2,000 convinced Marilyn to agree to another hotel meeting. Around 8:30 p.m., after dinner, the couple went to their hotel room. At 11:35 p.m., Galassi arrived at the police station and, similar to his 2004 case, confessed to murdering Marilyn. The police rushed to the hotel, hoping to find Marilyn still alive. Unfortunately, she had already been killed. The autopsy revealed 57 stab wounds on her body. It was determined that Galassi had spent about 2 hours at a bar before surrendering to the police, during which time he got rid of the murder weapon and Marilyn's cell phone. A terrible event occurred, but it was made even more distressing by the perpetrator's identity, past, and the circumstances surrounding his latest atrocity, sparking widespread outrage and demands for answers from the authorities. Bill Blair, the Secretary of Public Safety, expressed his condolences to Marilyn's family and stated that her death was preventable. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel sought an explanation for how a violent criminal like Galassi was granted parole and questioned whether the officers involved had sufficient training to assess public safety risks. She also called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. An investigation commission was established to examine the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in their work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada described Marilyn's death as a terrible tragedy that should never have occurred, promising that the Correctional Service of Canada, in collaboration with the parole board, would take significant steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile comments, no one faced serious punishment in the end. Some staff members from the parole board were reassigned to different roles, while others were sent for additional training. Unfortunately, there is no way to bring back the young woman who lost her life. It is hoped that her tragic death will make decision-makers think twice about the serious consequences of their actions. As part of a settlement agreement between the authorities and the victim's family, the government provided compensation for her death, which prevented a lawsuit from being filed by her relatives. The amount of compensation remains undisclosed due to confidentiality agreements. It's worth noting that some people even blamed the victim for her own death because of her profession. Galassi was initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder after it was revealed that he had planned the crime in advance and purchased the knife beforehand. Galassi admitted his guilt, confessing that he had deliberately planned the murder. During his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor argued that Galassi's motivation for the crime was jealousy, resulting from his realization that Marilyn was using him for financial gain. On February 27, 2020, the 51-year-old Eustacio Galassi was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. This time, he will be eligible to apply for parole, but not until he has served 25 years, unlike the 15-year requirement following the murder of his wife. Do you think Galassi will be released again if he lives to be 76 years old? Share your thoughts. The case of Zoe Nelson. Zoe Nelson was born on August 13, 1992, in Wishaw, Scotland. At the age of 18, she lived with her mother, stepfather, and two younger sisters, including 16-year-old Laura Ann, in New Mains, a village on the eastern edge of Wishaw, about 18 miles southeast of Glasgow. Zoe attended Motherwell College, where she was a popular student with many friends. A complicated romantic situation developed when both Zoe and her sister Laura Ann became involved with the same 20-year-old man, Robert Bain, who lived with his grandparents about a mile from the Nelson family home. Tensions between the sisters increased, leading to conflicts. On May 22, 2010, Zoe met Robert outside her home, which upset Laura Ann. When Laura Ann saw this, she rushed out of the house to confront Zoe. Their 40-year-old mother, Mary Ann Nelson, witnessed the fight between her daughters. According to Mary Ann, Laura Ann tried to provoke Zoe by flicking her hair and attempted to slap her face, leading to a physical altercation at the end of the driveway. Mary Ann intervened, breaking up the fight and telling the sisters to leave and not come back. Zoe complied with her mother's order and never returned home. At around 11 p.m. that same day, some locals spotted someone setting a fire in the wooded area known as Monkey Hill. The smell of smoke drifted to nearby homes, but at the time, no one paid much attention. Zoe's aunt, 35-year-old Shirley Nelson, later remembered that night, describing how she was sitting in her garden in New Mains after finishing her second shift at work. She and her sister sat in the back of the house until about 11 p.m. when it got cooler and they smelled smoke. However, they didn't think anything of it because of the warm weather. The next day, Zoe's family tried to contact her, but no one answered. On the afternoon of May 23rd, Stuart Bell, a 45-year-old government employee from Wishaw, rode his motorcycle into a nearby wooded area and saw something strange. At first, he thought it was a charred tailor's dummy, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body that had been badly damaged in a fire. He immediately went home to call the police, who arrived 15 to 20 minutes later. When the police arrived, they sealed off the area, as nothing so horrific had ever occurred there before. News of the body's discovery quickly spread, and when Zoe's family learned of it, her mother, Mary Ann Nelson, went to the police to report her daughter's disappearance, which had happened after they had fought, and Mary Ann told Zoe not to come home. The police soon broke the devastating news to the Nelson family. Zoe had fallen victim to a crime. Mary Ann issued a statement through the police, describing Zoe as a typical popular 17-year-old with a strong presence in the local community and many friends. In just a couple of months, she would have turned 18. Her family is deeply distraught over her loss. Zoe's stepfather, Daniel, and her sisters, Laura Ann and Ashley, are heartbroken about what happened, and the family is urging anyone with information to come forward and assist the police in their investigation. Hugh Logan, the principal of Motherwell College, where Zoe studied vehicle body repair, expressed shock on behalf of the college community upon learning the dreadful news of her death. He described Zoe as a very popular student and conveyed that the college's thoughts are with her family and friends. A thorough investigation of the scene spanned several days, with a team of at least 50 police officers working on the case. Detective Derek Robertson, part of the main investigation team, lamented the loss of Zoe's young life and vowed that his officers would not rest until the perpetrator was caught. He urged anyone who saw Zoe between 5 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. on Saturday night to come forward and assist the investigation. Robertson noted that, given the area's popularity on the hottest day of the year, numerous people would have been taking shortcuts and sunbathing, and that the police were particularly interested in speaking with those who may have used the dirt trails, including one that crossed near the location where Zoe's body was found. Zoe was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a heavy build and collar-length brown hair. At the time she went missing, she was wearing gray tracksuit bottoms, a white long-sleeve top, and black Nike trainers. The detectives have been reviewing CCTV footage, phone records and computer data, as well as conducting door-to-door inquiries and speaking to Zoe's friends and family to try to recreate her last movements on May 26th. The police released video footage from a local shop where Zoe was seen just hours before she died. These small details were crucial to the investigation, as they helped the police trace Zoe's movements and ultimately led to the arrest of the person responsible for her death. After examining the crime scene, investigators found a red plastic sombrero-shaped cap from a Sierra Silver tequila bottle near the body and an empty bottle of the same brand on the other side of a small walkway nearby. Due to the body being exposed to fire for approximately 7 hours, forensic experts faced limitations in determining the exact cause of death. The body was discovered with a partially melted plastic bag covering most of the face, leading pathologists to conclude that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. Despite the damage, the palm of the right hand remained relatively intact, allowing 2 DNA samples to be collected, one matching Zoe Nelson herself and the other belonging to an unidentified male. Ultimately, the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. By May 28th, police had gathered several witness statements that provided a disturbing account of Zoe's last days. One witness reported seeing Zoe with a heavily intoxicated and aggressive man at around 5:15 p.m. on May 22nd, who was hitting her on the head. Another witness claimed to have seen Zoe walking with a man with a tattooed face near his home in New Mains. A third witness described seeing Zoe with a similar-looking man in New Mains, who appeared angry, hit a lamppost, and threatened to take someone's life that night. Multiple witnesses came forward, all describing the same young man, 20-year-old Robert Bain. Notably, Robert Bain had a prior criminal record despite his youth. He had served 18 months in prison for robbery and was released just 7 weeks before Zoe's death. Additionally, he had been arrested 4 times for possessing illegal substances, though as a juvenile, he faced minimal consequences. Investigators started to view Robert Bain as a prime suspect in the case. Before they could take further action, Bain surprisingly turned up at the police station in Wishaw around 5:50 p.m. on May 28th. He was clearly intoxicated, slurring his words, and wanted to make a statement. Bain claimed that a few days prior, he had been in Motherwell, where he got on a bus to return home. During the journey, he said, a man named Stuart Campbell boarded the same bus. Bain alleged that he approached Campbell and asked if he had been with Zoe on the previous Saturday night. According to Bain, Campbell's response was incriminating. Yes, I took her life. This was the first mention of Stuart Campbell's name during the entire investigation, whereas Robert Bain's name had come up repeatedly. As a result, the police arrested Bain on the same day. A strong justification for Robert Bain's arrest would emerge during his trial. At the time of his arrest, Bain claimed to have last seen Zoe on the morning in May. However, forensic tests revealed incriminating evidence against him. A DNA sample from Zoe Nelson's hand revealed not only her own DNA, but also traces of another person's DNA, which matched part of Bain's DNA profile. Additionally, DNA evidence found on a tequila bottle and its cap, discovered near Zoe's body, matched both Zoe Nelson and Robert Bain. According to the forensic expert, this suggested that both individuals had consumed from the bottle and then replaced the cap. Expert Marie Campbell stated that the scientific findings indicated that Robert Bain's DNA was deposited between Zoe Nelson's fingers and on her right palm. The chances of the DNA found on the red plastic sombrero lid belonging to anyone other than Robert Bain were an astonishing 10 million to 1. Robert Bain was accused of being involved in Zoe Nelson's death due to multiple eyewitness accounts and DNA evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty and acted defiantly, even confronting one of the investigators. He also denied an earlier alleged assault on Zoe, where a witness claimed he struck her on the head with his fist. Hundreds attended Zoe Nelson's funeral at Courtness Memorial Church on June 16, 2010. She was laid to rest at Campus Nathan Cemetery. Over 200 mourners, including her mother, sisters, and grandmother gathered to pay their respects. Reverend Graham Rayburn led the service, noting the large turnout as a testament to Zoe's significant impact. He described her as a happy, cheerful teenager with a big heart who loved fast cars and rangers. Sadly, she never met her newborn nephew or got to contact her biological father. On March 1, 2011, Robert Bain's trial began, during which he maintained his innocence. Testifying in court, Zoe Nelson's teenage friends recalled a conversation they had with her a week before her death, in which she attributed her scratches and bruises to a fight with Robert Bain. According to her friends, Zoe described Bain as bossy, unstable, and prone to anger over minor issues. He also controlled her social circle, dictating which friends she could see. Although Zoe and Bain's relationship was relatively short-lived, given he had only been out of prison for 2 months, he exerted significant influence over her and also pursued a relationship with her 16-year-old sister, Laura Ann. Notably, Laura Ann was aware of her sister's death 5 days before the body was discovered by a passerby, but kept this secret until the trial, where it was revealed that Bain had taken Laura Ann to the location of Zoe's body. Laura Ann, who testified from behind a screen to avoid seeing Bain, recounted that on May 23rd, the day after her argument with Zoe, she visited Bain's address to return some clothes. Upon arrival, she observed that Robert seemed nervous and had been consuming vodka. They soon left the house, with Bain claiming he wanted to show her something. According to Laura Ann, he led her to the location where Zoe's body lay. Recognizing the ranger's tattoo on her arm, Laura Ann identified the body as her sister. During court questioning, Laura Ann stated that Bain had confessed to hitting Zoe, and when Zoe attempted to retaliate, he lost control and took her life. Bain then allegedly used gasoline in an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the crime. Laura Ann confessed to walking with Bain on the day following the discovery of the body. Afterwards, she visited his home, spending time in his bedroom, where they listened to music together. She also had a phone conversation with him that lasted around an hour. A friend of Laura Ann, who testified in court, recalled that Laura Ann seemed happy and normal, despite knowing her sister was dead. When questioned about why she didn't reveal everything to the police during her initial interrogation, Laura Ann explained that she was afraid that if she told them, her mother wouldn't believe her and would think she was responsible for Zoe's death. The jury heard testimony from Laura Ann Nelson, who stated that Robert Bain had threatened her, saying she would face the same consequences as Zoe if she told anyone about his actions. On March 25, 2011, a jury of 7 men and 7 women delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. As the verdict was read, Bain became violent, requiring physical restraint. Handcuffed, he jumped up in the dock, struggling with security officers and police, and headbutting one of them. He also shouted insults and threats at Zoe Nelson's family, forcing the courtroom to be cleared while order was restored. After a 20-minute adjournment, Judge Lady Dorian agreed to proceed with the trial in Bain's absence. In a separate matter, Robert Bain was acquitted of stealing alcohol from an Asda store in New Mains on May 22nd, as well as disorderly conduct related to yelling, cursing, and waving a knife in various streets in Wishaw on the same day. Bain was also acquitted of stealing Zoe's cell phone, which was found in the woods, and of threatening a police officer during an interview at the Motherwell police station on May 28th. On April 27, 2011, Robert Bain was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years for taking the life of Zoe Nelson. He received another 6 years for the obstruction of justice charge, and both sentences were to be served concurrently. The judge, Lady Dorian, described the crime as appalling and shocking. On Christmas Eve 2022, 29-year-old Laura Ann Nelson was found dead in her apartment after not being heard from for days. She was left with 2 children, ages 3 and 4. Her death was not considered criminal, as she had health problems, namely type 1 diabetes. the case of Agustina Imvinkelried. Agustina was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza. Agustina lived with her large family, and as the youngest of 5 children, received special treatment. People described Agustina as friendly, kind, and always smiling. Like many young people, she enjoyed going to the movies, bowling, discos, and playing the ukulele with her friends. Esperanza is a small town of around 40,000 residents, where everyone tends to know each other. The limited entertainment options led to the town's young people frequently running into and knowing one another. On the afternoon of January 12, 2019, Agustina's father dropped her off at a friend's house, where a group of 6 planned to gather. The girls had arranged to visit a nightclub and bowling center called Teos together. Agustina told her father she would spend the night at a friend's house. After leaving the club, Agustina sent a message to her boyfriend, Nahuel, asking him to join her, but he declined, saying he was tired. At the club, Agustina and her friends were having a blast, dancing and enjoying the music. By 5 a.m., they decided it was time to head out, but Agustina ran into another group of friends and decided to stick around for a bit longer. A surveillance camera captured her leaving the venue at 5:40 a.m., carrying her cell phone. After leaving the club, Agustina stopped by a fast food stand, waited in line, chatted with an acquaintance, and then headed towards the road. Normally, Agustina's parents knew her whereabouts because she always kept them informed. However, when morning arrived and they didn't receive a text from her saying she had made it to her friend's house safely, they grew concerned and tried to reach her, but her phone was unavailable. Her friend told the worried parents that Agustina hadn't returned from the club. Agustina's parents then contacted all her acquaintances, but no one knew where she might be. As a result, Agustina's father called the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. Daniel Rinklevery, a well-known local figure and president of the town's soccer club, was also the owner of a small furniture manufacturing and sales company. When news broke that he was in distress, many townspeople volunteered to help with the search for his missing niece, Agustina. Agustina's friends turned to social media to spread the word about her disappearance, which eventually caught the attention of television news programs. As a result, the police launched an investigation, focusing on Teos Club, the last place Agustina was seen. They interviewed potential witnesses and reviewed surveillance footage, which showed Agustina walking towards the road, but didn't provide any further leads. The police then broadened their search, questioning residents living along the road and staff from nearby businesses. They hoped someone might have seen or heard something, no matter how insignificant, that could serve as a clue to Agustina's whereabouts. Brian, a friend of Agustina's, heard about her disappearance on social media. He saw the many posts about finding her and got in touch with her father, Daniel. Brian told Daniel that he had seen Agustina outside Teos Club at around 6 a.m. He was driving by and noticed her standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. This was a few hundred meters from the club. Brian drove on, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Agustina to check on her. He asked if she was okay and if she needed a ride home. Agustina told him she was fine, and that the man driving the silver car had stopped to warn her that the road wasn't safe to walk on because of the risk of being hit by traffic. She accepted Brian's offer of a ride, saying she was on her way to a friend's house. Brian then turned his car around and headed back towards Teos Club. When he arrived, Agustina was no longer there, and neither was the silver car. Assuming she had gone with the driver, Brian continued to try calling her, but she did not answer. Concerned, he drove to the friend's house she had mentioned, but there was no sign of her. He continued to check his phone for updates, hoping to hear from her or see her posting on social media. After learning about Agustina's disappearance and the discovery of her body, Brian shared crucial information with the police, providing a potential lead on the silver car and its driver. This testimony added vital details to the timeline, helping investigators reconstruct Agostina's final moments. Brian had stopped at a nearby gas station, about a few hundred meters from where he last saw Agostina, to wait for her and fill up his car. When Agostina failed to show up 15 minutes later, Brian went to look for her, but couldn't find her. His attempts to contact her were also unsuccessful, as she didn't answer. At the time, he didn't think much of it, assuming Agostina had gone directly to her friend's house and forgotten about their meeting. The primary clue in the investigation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he recalled it was an older vehicle. The driver might have been the last person to see Agostina, and it was possible that he was linked to her disappearance. When the police attempted to track Agostina's cell phone, they found that the last signal it transmitted was received by a tower located in the same neighborhood as Teo's club. Since the club was situated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by numerous vacant lots and fields, the search teams focused their search efforts in these areas. Of all the organizations along the road Agostina was walking on, only this particular gas station had installed surveillance cameras. Daniel suspected that Agostina might have passed by the gas station, given its proximity to her friend's house, and so he went there to review the footage and see if it had captured his daughter. The gas station attendant, a fellow father, sympathized with Daniel's concern and showed him the recording from that morning, which almost resulted in the attendant losing his job, as it was against the rules to share the footage with unauthorized individuals. The gas station owner was furious when he found out and fired the attendant on the spot. However, when the townspeople heard what had happened, they boycotted the gas station, taking their business elsewhere. This backlash forced the gas station owner to reconsider, and he eventually rehired the attendant, apologizing to him publicly in front of Esperanza. Daniel reviewed the gas station's camera footage, but didn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Agostina never made it there. However, the footage did show the same old silver Renault car Brian had described earlier. It drove past the gas station around the time Agostina was walking along the road. Daniel identified the car's owner as 39-year-old Pablo Trionfini, a municipal garbage collector who lived less than a kilometer away. Although he had no prior criminal record, Trionfini had caught the police's attention before. In 2017, his ex-wife reported him for domestic abuse, which led to a court order prohibiting him from contacting her. He was arrested again that year for violating that order. Not long after Daniel viewed the gas station's security footage, police officers arrived, unaware that Agostina's father had already seen it. They viewed the surveillance video and recognized the silver car. However, when they discovered that Daniel had seen the video before them, they feared a lynching might occur and rushed to Pablo Trionfini's house. Upon arrival, they found a crowd gathered in front of the house, shouting, "Where is Agostina?" The crowd dispersed when the police arrived, and one of the onlookers told the officers that Trionfini was inside. He had peeked out after hearing the shouting but fled back into the house and bolted the door when he saw the hostile crowd. Lacking probable cause for an unauthorized entry, the officers requested a search warrant. While waiting, they cordoned off the house to prevent Trionfini's escape. Around midnight, an officer decided to investigate the yard and found Pablo Trionfini deceased. The police rushed to help, but it was too late. Trionfini's death implicated him in Agostina's disappearance, but a search of his house and car yielded no evidence. By taking his own life, Trionfini had avoided further trouble and consequences. As the police were searching the house, Trionfini's neighbor approached them and said that Pablo had dropped by during the day and asked to borrow a shovel, allegedly to dig for some earthworms because he was going fishing. A half hour later, he returned the shovel and said something that struck the neighbor as very odd. Witnesses saw Trionfini leave the house several times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while holding a shovel. This possibly meant that Agostina was no longer among the living. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search began at daybreak with the aid of drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Augustina's half-stripped body was discovered approximately 500 meters away from Teo's club. It had been concealed in a ditch covered with dense vegetation. The forensic examination showed that Augustina had fought desperately for her life. Her hands had defensive wounds, and pieces of her attacker's skin were found under her fingernails. DNA analysis verified that the man who assaulted Augustina was Pablo Trionfini. Forensics ruled the cause of death as strangulation. The exact circumstances of how Augustina ended up in Pablo Trionfini's car remain a mystery. Did he force her in, or did he simply offer her a lift? We will never know for certain, as the only two people who could provide answers are now deceased and unable to speak. A thorough search of Trionfini's phone revealed no evidence to suggest that he had any prior connection to Augustina. Hundreds of mourners attended Augustina Vincariad's funeral to pay their respects, whereas, surprisingly, not even Pablo Trionfini's family members showed up to his own funeral, according to reports by Argentine media outlets. The case of Michelle Anglin. Michelle Lee Cohen Anglin was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California, but soon her family moved to Arizona, where she grew up with her mother Peggy and stepfather Larry McCall. She also had two older sisters, Cindy and Christina. At around 20 years old, Michelle started dating Hudson England, and they gradually fell in love. When Hudson proposed, Michelle accepted without hesitation. In late 1995, the couple got married in the presence of their families and friends, planning a honeymoon and their future together. However, tragedy struck just 4 months after the wedding, changing Michelle's life forever. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, a realtor herself, inspired Michelle to join the industry. According to the Arizona Association of Realtors, there are no mandatory safety measures in place for Arizona realtors. Nevertheless, many builders and agencies provide them with various resources and safety tips to help them stay safe on the job. When Michelle was at the office, her family members, including her husband, sisters, and mother, would typically get in touch with her using her work phone. Whenever she was out showing houses to clients, Michelle would always carry a pager with her so that her family could reach her if needed. However, on February 9, 1996, Michelle failed to respond to her loved one's calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Normally, she would let someone know about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. The job of a realtor comes with significant risks, often higher than those in other professions. Realtors can be attractive targets for predators because they often work alone and sometimes show properties in remote areas. Experienced realtors are well aware of the dangers associated with this job. Predators may lure them to an isolated location, such as an empty house with no nearby neighbors, under the guise of wanting to buy a property. In reality, they have a different motive. When a realtor finds themselves alone in an empty house with such an individual, the situation can quickly turn bad. To avoid potential risks, realtors are cautioned to maintain a safe distance from clients, stay near the front door, and leave immediately if they sense anything unusual. This is why Michelle's family became worried when they couldn't reach her during the day. Michelle's sister, Cindy, was dating a Phoenix police officer. Concerned about her sister's safety, Cindy asked her boyfriend to perform a welfare check at Michelle's workplace. When he arrived, he found Michelle's car parked outside, but upon inspecting it, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary and assumed Michelle was working in the office. However, when he entered the office, he was surprised to find no one there. The lights were on and music was playing, but what he saw next raised concerns. Michelle's purse and pager were left on the table, unlocked, with no signs of struggle or explanation for her sudden departure. That evening, Michelle's family filed an official missing persons report with the police. Earlier that day, Michelle had scheduled a meeting with a potential buyer to show them 3 houses near her office, so she decided not to drive. The police officers who responded to the report inspected Michelle's office and then visited the 3 model homes she may have been showing to the buyer. They performed a preliminary search of each house and found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor of one of them. They also noticed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, 1 into each sink, but everything else seemed undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend got in touch with Cindy to ask if she could describe what Michelle was wearing that day. He wanted to know if the pink buttons found belonged to Michelle's clothes. Unfortunately, Cindy couldn't recall what Michelle had on that day. The officers were convinced that the buttons belonged to a woman due to their color. The police conducted a more thorough search of all 3 houses, focusing especially on the one where the buttons were discovered. Tragically, they found Michelle Anglin's lifeless body under the master bed, which was twisted, severely bruised, and showed signs of a violent struggle. In the closet of the same bedroom, they found traces of seminal fluid, indicating a possible sexual assault. Further investigation revealed broken ceramic candlesticks, pieces of Michelle's clothing, paint, and plaster chips under the bed, as well as in the master bathroom. However, the autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy before Michelle's death. The forensic expert concluded that the perpetrator had attempted to undress Michelle, but she resisted, leading to a violent struggle. Michelle was ultimately strangled, as evidenced by 3 bruises on the left side of her neck and 1 on the right side. According to court documents, a fierce fight took place between Michelle and her attacker in the master closet and bathroom. The master closet contained buttons and seminal fluid, indicating a significant struggle. Additionally, the master bathroom area had damaged candles and candlesticks, while both the bathroom and under the master bed had paint and ceramic chips. These findings demonstrated the extent of the violence. Michelle's clothing was torn and intertwined, suggesting that the perpetrator had forcibly ripped it from her body. She suffered numerous abrasions and bruises on various parts of her body, and her injured hands and wrists indicated that she had been struggling to defend herself. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, reflected on her daughter's tragic death, saying she thinks about her every day. However, instead of remembering the good times, she can only recall the bad times and the fear Michelle must have felt in her final moments. Peggy Cohen McCall was not present to comfort her daughter and alleviate her fears. Following her daughter's death, Peggy Cohen McCall claimed she lost her job due to speaking out about the dangers faced by women working alone at open houses and model homes. The police's first port of call in their investigation was Michelle's husband, Hudson England. This was a routine step, as the police always consider the possibility that a family member might be involved in a crime. Michelle's family didn't think Hudson was capable of taking his wife's life, given that they had been married for just 4 months and seemed happy and in love. However, it's worth noting that a short marriage doesn't rule out the possibility of foul play, as seen in the tragic case of Krista Alexander, who was found dead just 4 months after her wedding. The investigators interviewed Hudson, and he appeared genuinely shaken by Michelle's death. He readily shared his whereabouts and activities on the day of her murder. According to Hudson, he had spent the day visiting car dealerships in search of a family car, as he and Michelle were planning to start a family. The police verified his alibi and found it to be true, which led them to clear him of suspicion. Hudson also told the investigators that he had no idea who might have wanted to harm Michelle, and suspected that she might have been attacked by someone she was showing the house to. The police examined Michelle's mobile phone records, which revealed that on February 9th, she was on a call with a fellow sales agent between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m. During this conversation, Michelle mentioned that she had to end the call because a potential buyer had just arrived at her subdivision. The agent tried to return Michelle's call between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., but received no answer. This information allowed the detectives to narrow down the time frame of Michelle's attack. However, they still needed to identify the identity of the potential buyer she was supposed to show the model homes to. Unfortunately, Michelle did not mention the man's name during her phone conversation with the fellow agent, nor did she record his name in her work notes. The police lacked immediate leads on the mysterious potential buyer due to lack of information. To generate leads, they sought out witnesses, interviewing residents in the area where Michelle was attacked. A local resident, who coincidentally arrived home from work between 4:45 p.m. on February 9th, reported seeing a white man descending the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale. This witness also noticed a black, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates in the house's parking lot. Additionally, prospective buyers who visited the subdivision between 4 and 4:30 p.m. that day recalled seeing a man walking from the direction of the 2nd and 3rd model homes. They also reported that candlesticks in the 3rd model's master bath had been knocked over into the sinks. The police made a public appeal through the media, seeking any relevant information about the case. They shared details about Michelle England's attack, hoping for clues, and fortunately, this effort was successful. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate, contacted the police on February 9th, the same day Michelle's lifeless body was found. Ramos reported that at around 2 p.m. that day, she had met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. The truck caught her attention because it seemed out of place with the $500,000 house the client wanted to buy, suggesting a more modest lifestyle. The client asked Ramos to accompany him to a 2-story house to answer some questions. Although she went with him, she was cautious due to his invasion of her personal space, walking too close and touching her hand several times. She also thought his questions about the tiled floor and the option of a 4th bedroom and den were unconvincing. Ramos asked the client to fill out a guest registration card, which he completed, listing his name as James Adams and providing his home address and phone number. Later, police officers arrived at the address and saw an old black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates. Although 32-year-old James Van Adams, the truck's owner, was not home, the police took pictures of the truck and showed them to Ramos. She confirmed that it was the same pickup truck driven by the suspicious client she had met earlier that day, just before Michelle England's death. When investigators looked into James Van Adams's past, they were surprised by what they found. He was married and had a child, but he and his wife were currently going through a separation. Adams had a criminal record, having been convicted in California for a crime he committed in 1990. Melissa Cunningham, a petite 5'4" sales agent weighing 102 pounds, was working alone at a new apartment complex when Adams approached her. He asked her to show him around the model homes that were still under construction. Specifically, he was interested in a 2-story model with a master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. Melissa spent a few minutes with Adams in the upstairs master bedroom and bathroom. As they made their way back down the stairs, Melissa, who was leading the way, heard 2 thuds that sounded like footsteps. She felt a sudden push and fell to the floor below. Adams quickly apologized, claiming he had tripped on a nail, which they both looked for as an explanation for the incident. Adams grabbed Melissa from behind, wrapping one hand around her neck and choking her while twisting her head to the left with his other hand. He threatened to break her neck if she screamed. He then dragged her down the hallway into the kitchen, threw her to the floor, and started tearing off her clothes. Luckily, Melissa managed to escape. She memorized the license plate of Adams' truck and contacted the police. Adams was soon arrested and spent only 2 years in prison for the attack. When investigating Michelle England's death, it didn't take long for detectives to discover Adams' previous failed attack. They obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. However, he refused to talk and appeared nervous, with injuries under his eye. The detectives suspected that these injuries could have been inflicted by Michelle defending herself with the missing candlesticks, which were later found. They took samples of James's DNA, blood, and hair for further investigation. Kim Ramos, who had met with Adams just a few hours before Michelle's body was found, stated that when she showed him around the house, he didn't have any injuries, bruises, or scratches on his face. However, Adams later claimed that he got hurt while working on his pickup truck. But during the investigation, it was discovered that Adams left work on February 9th at noon and didn't return, citing car troubles. His employer and colleague testified that when they saw him next, he had a facial injury and a black eye that hadn't been there on February 8th or 9th. Initially, the analysis of Adams's DNA, blood, and hair samples excluded him as a contributor, but when the crime lab retested the samples, they got contradictory results, this time including him as a contributor. The Department of Public Safety, DPS, verified the latter result with additional testing. Although the police took extensive fingerprints and footprints at the model home, none of them matched Adams. James Van Adams denied any involvement in the crime. His trial started on July 1st, 1997. Prosecutors presented evidence that implicated Adams in Michelle's death, including testimony from Kim Ramos, who believed she was lucky because Adams had intended to target her before attacking Michelle. Ramos also stated that she didn't believe Adams was genuinely interested in buying a house, citing his clothing, vehicle, and questions about the flooring and fourth bedroom, which she thought were absurd. The state also presented evidence of Adams' interactions with other sales agents on several occasions. In California, several years prior, Adams had interacted with agents. Additionally, months before the attack on Michelle England, he had been in Briarwood, Sientra, and even hours before the attack, he was in contact with other agents. Susan Wright, an employee of Homes by Dave Brown, testified that she had multiple face-to-face meetings with Adams at the Briarwood subdivision and numerous phone conversations with him while working at Briarwood and later at another subdivision. Wright remembered their first meeting in September or October 1995, when Adams asked to view a house for sale. She recalled that Adams stood too close to her, and despite indicating he had questions, didn't ask a single question during the viewing. When other potential buyers arrived, they immediately left and returned to the office. On November 5th, 1995, Adams visited Wright's office again, filling out the guest registration card as Jim Adams. According to Wright, Adams repeatedly visited her office and called her, asking her out on dates each time. It became apparent that James Van Adams exhibited a repetitive pattern of criminal behavior. The victims he attacked in California in 1990, including Michelle England, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham, shared similar physical characteristics. Additionally, they all worked alone, and the incidents occurred in the afternoon. In the cases of Melissa Cunningham and Kim Ramos, Adams requested that they accompany him to an upstairs location in a two-story house. The evidence found near Michelle England's body suggested that he made the same request to her as well. Adams's method of attack involved putting his right arm around the victims' necks, as seen in the cases of Michelle England and Melissa Cunningham. In both instances, the attacker removed the victims' clothes and attempted to sexually assault them, indicating that Adams was preparing to commit a crime. Adams targeted potential victims who worked alone and could show him houses for sale without witnesses. The trial process proved to be another ordeal for Michelle's family, who were present in the courtroom. The judge had to remove Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, due to her emotional outbursts as she screamed at Adams. However, Adams seemed to take pleasure in seeing Michelle's family suffer and periodically flashed a grin during the trial. On July 14, 1997, the court sentenced Adams to death, despite his claims of innocence throughout the trial. He subsequently exhausted all legal avenues to appeal the verdict, citing the 1990 incident in California, where Melissa Cunningham escaped as evidence that he didn't intend to kill Michelle England. Adams argued that, given this previous incident, The jury should have concluded he was guilty of premeditated second-degree murder, not first-degree murder. Ultimately, all his appeals failed. Adams was found dead in his prison cell on March 14, 2005, and attempts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful. The cause of death was asphyxia, which he had inflicted upon himself. Upon hearing the news, Michelle's family, including her mother Peggy, were overjoyed, with Peggy describing it as a good day. The case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30, 1997, in Minnesota to Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim. She was their second child, with an older brother named Josh, with whom she shared a close bond that grew stronger as they grew older. In the second grade, Sarah's family moved from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was not only a diligent student, but also an enthusiastic member of the school band, playing the drums. Sarah had a deep passion for music, particularly foreign music and drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly participated in weekly jam sessions at various Reading venues. Her drumming skills stood out, and she was a rare female presence on stage. At 18, Sarah returned to her native Minnesota with her mother and brother, following her parents' divorce. She continued to play drums at various Minnesota venues, which eventually led her to meet renowned blues guitarist and singer Bernard Allison. He was impressed by her performance, and Sarah began to occasionally perform at his concerts. By 19, Sarah had become a local blues sensation, earning the nickname Ronald McDonald due to her striking, wide smile. Josh's life was deeply affected by his parents' divorce. He had been grappling with depression and mental health issues for years. Those close to him at the time had no idea how desperate his situation would become. On an ordinary day in February 2016, Donnie received an unexpected visit from the police. When she opened the door, they asked about her relationship to Josh Pappenheim. After identifying herself as his mother, the officers delivered devastating news that would forever change her life. Tragically, 20-year-old Josh had taken his own life, leaving his loved ones reeling from the loss. As Donnie would later recall, Sarah cried so intensely that her tear ducts dried up. Under Josh's obituary, her message still remains, promising to love her son forever. Sarah and her brother Josh were extremely close. She was devastated by his passing and the fact that he had taken his own life. Rather than letting the pain overwhelm her, Sarah decided to pursue psychology to help people struggling with mental health issues in the future. Sarah had been in touch with Nico Carson, a guy from the Netherlands, for a while. She decided to move there and enroll at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where she began studying psychology. Nico, being a native speaker, helped Sarah navigate her loss, assisted her with her studies, and supported her in any way possible. Although Sarah was dedicated to her studies and work, her passion for music never faded. She reached out to Bernard Allison, a fellow musician and friend she had performed with in the past, to share her excitement about finally saving up enough money to buy the drum kit she had always dreamed of owning. In January 2017, Bernard Allison went on tour in Europe with his band. On Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended his concert in Germany with Nico, and as soon as Bernard saw her, he invited her on stage to play the drums alongside him, just like they used to do. Sarah lived in a third-floor apartment in a complex just a mile from the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she was looking forward to spending Christmas back home in the United States. Her flight was scheduled about a week before New Year's Eve, but everything took an unexpected turn on December 12th. Donnie Odegaard's heart sank when she saw a police officer standing on her doorstep, a sight that brought back painful memories of 2016, the year her son passed away. As the officer began questioning her about her daughter, her legs started shaking uncontrollably. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, yet she couldn't bring herself to accept the devastating news. The officer, convinced that he was speaking to Sarah Pappenheim's mother, delivered the heartbreaking news. her daughter had passed away. Doni felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The news was too much to bear, and she lost consciousness. This tragedy was all too familiar. She had lost her 20-year-old son just a few years ago, and now her 21-year-old daughter was gone too. The girl lived in a third-floor apartment in a complex where most residents were students. For the past year, Sarah had rented an apartment there and shared it with Joel Schelling, a fellow student and talented double bass musician like herself. Their shared passion for music brought them together. Sarah was an outgoing and cheerful person, unlike her roommate Joel, who had a short temper and occasionally quarreled with her. Despite his difficult behavior, Sarah was loyal and didn't want to abandon him to his problems, possibly because she remembered what had happened to her brother. 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor in Wisconsin, expressing fear of Joel, who had told her he intended to harm 3 people he disliked. A couple of days before she passed away, Sarah also spoke to her mother on the phone, sharing her growing concerns about Joel's behavior. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live immediately and to keep her distance from Joel until she moved out. On Wednesday, December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., Sarah and Joel got into a loud fight at their apartment, which prompted their next-door neighbors to call the police. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor, unconscious and suffering from multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah sadly died. Joel, her roommate, was not present at the scene. It seemed he had fled, and the police launched a search for him. After questioning neighbors on the same floor, the officers discovered that Joel had hastily left the apartment, taking a large double bass with him. This unusual detail was included in the description sent out to authorities less than 2 hours after the crime. The police eventually tracked down 23-year-old Joel Schelling at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. As it turned out, Joel was heading to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. During the train ride, he called his mother and confessed to killing Sarah. The judge ordered Schelling to be held for 14 days to determine if he suffered from mental health issues. An autopsy revealed that Sarah's body had 27 stab wounds, including several in her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah's death, Doni Odegaard traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned to their home country. This required raising $40,000, which the family was able to do with the help of supportive individuals. Doni's first priority was to discover if Sarah had reported to the police that her roommate was planning to attack 3 people. It turned out that Sarah had not contacted the authorities. However, she had reached out to social workers who assist people with psychological difficulties. These social workers visited Schelling and found him to be calm, straightforward, and coherent in his answers, giving them the impression that he was normal. The next day, Sarah had to contact social services again. This was because Schelling, in a rage, started hitting himself with a hammer and threatened to harm several people soon. Sarah was worried that Joel would discover she had reported him to the authorities. However, the social worker didn't have time to respond to Sarah's second request because she had already died. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Poppenheim's death. He admitted his guilt, but claimed he didn't recall taking her life. He remembered the fight, but when he came to, he was already in the shower, cleaning himself. The trial began in March 2019. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, attended every hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling claimed he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. When the judge asked Schelling if the voices in his head had told him to fight Sarah, he said he didn't know and couldn't recall. He also claimed he didn't remember what sparked the fight between them. Before the verdict was announced in December 2019, medical experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple mental health disorders and required long-term treatment. However, they concluded that he was still responsible for taking Sarah Poppenheim's life. The experts reasoned that Schelling remembered the start of the fight and physically struggling with Sarah, and he had the ability to choose whether to stop or grab the knife. He chose the latter and therefore should be punished. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence for Schelling, but the Rotterdam judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison, followed by involuntary commitment to a psychiatric hospital. The court explained that it rejected the prosecutor's 10-year sentence request due to Schelling's youth and his significantly impaired mental state at the time of the crime. As a result, Schelling cannot be fully held accountable for the proven facts of the case. The court has stated that, due to the seriousness and unpredictability of the crime, as well as the suspect's severe psychological disorders, there is a high likelihood of him committing another violent crime. The suspect requires long-term treatment and supervision in a clinical setting for his chronic conditions. The court views the psychiatric detention as a form of punishment for Schelling, who has expressed willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. Schelling will remain in detention for treatment until the court, which will review his progress every 2 years, decides that he is well enough to be released. Additionally, the court has ordered Schelling to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard was outraged by the sentence, claiming it was not justice. In her opinion, the minimum sentence in America should have been at least 10 years. She pointed out that Schelling could have faced life imprisonment or even the death penalty, ensuring he would never have the chance to commit such a heinous crime again. Her main concern was that Schelling might be released on parole in just 4 years, a prospect she vowed to fight against, using every means at her disposal to keep him incarcerated for as long as possible. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers Sarah had contacted. The conclusion was that they were not culpable, as they lacked the necessary expertise to identify the disorders Schelling was subsequently diagnosed with. The case of Sierra Breland. The disappearance of 31-year-old Sierra Breland, an Indiana lawyer from Cleveland, Georgia. The last time she was seen was on February 24, 2022 at 7:17 p.m. when a surveillance camera captured her outside her mother-in-law's home in Johns Creek. Despite extensive efforts by the police and her family, Sierra's whereabouts and what happened to her remain unknown. Sierra was a cheerful and ambitious woman, according to her mother Kelly. She was determined to be taken seriously, so she worked hard to become a lawyer, following in her mother's footsteps as a paralegal. Growing up in Georgia, Sierra dreamed of living in Atlanta one day. To achieve this goal, she attended the University of Tennessee for college, and then Florida State University for law school. Kelly said Sierra was happy, energetic, loving, and extremely driven in her career. In October 2020, Sierra met Xavier Breland on Tinder, and their relationship quickly developed. 6 months later, the couple got married, and Sierra became pregnant. According to court records, Sierra provided legal assistance to Xavier in his dispute with his ex-wife. The newlyweds decided to start a new life in Carmel, Indiana, where Sierra got a job at a law firm. In 2021, she gave birth to a son named Jackson. Xavier and Sierra appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, but their relationship was plagued by issues from the early stages. According to Shelby Campbell, Sierra's cousin, the problems between them surfaced shortly after their initial dates. Sierra had told Xavier she wanted no further contact, but he refused to accept rejection. Instead, he began showing up uninvited at her apartment, sitting outside her door. He also sent her threatening messages after seeing her with another man. Sierra warned him she would involve the authorities if he persisted. Despite this, she eventually gave him another chance, and 6 months later, they got married. Shelby and Sierra were inseparable, exchanging daily texts. Sierra confided in her, revealing her fears about her husband. In one message, she wrote, "I'm really struggling to cope with this. I don't want to give up on someone I love and abandon our family, but his behavior is getting worse, not better." It makes me wonder what the future holds. He used to feel guilty when he said hurtful things, but lately he doesn't even apologize. He blames me, saying I did this because you made me. Syria feared that if something happened to her, her husband would be to blame. Shelby claims that she frequently advised Sierra to leave her husband, but Sierra understood the importance of planning her exit carefully. The text messages Shelby shared only provide a glimpse into the situation between Sierra and her husband. Sierra did call the police on multiple occasions, and law enforcement responded to her residence in both Georgia and Indiana multiple times. According to Campbell, by the time the police arrived, Sierra would have calmed down enough to cover for her husband, denying any abuse. Shelby revealed that an investigator even contacted Sierra's mother after one of these incidents, telling her that he knew Sierra was lying about the abuse when she called 911. The investigator had seen this pattern before and was worried that something terrible might happen to Sierra. Sierra was determined to leave her husband Xavier and had been secretly building up a bank account to prepare for her independence. Despite sending messages to Xavier claiming she loved him, she had reached the conclusion that she couldn't afford to stay in the troubled relationship. Aware of their daughter's difficulties, Sierra's parents, Kelly and Nick, encouraged her to break free from Xavier and promised her a safe haven back at home if she needed it. Sierra's decisive trip to Georgia began when she and Xavier packed up their baby and large dog into a 2017 white Volkswagen Tiguan for the 11-hour drive south. According to her family, Sierra arrived at her parents' house on February 19th, where she spent the night reconnecting with relatives she hadn't seen since moving to Indiana. Although it seemed like a brief visit, Sierra had made up her mind not to return to Indiana, marking a new chapter in her life. Xavier was interested in this trip because his mother lived in Georgia, just like Sierra's mother. However, Xavier didn't know that Sierra didn't plan to return to Indiana. Sierra had told her mother that she was going to find a job in Georgia and that she was getting a divorce due to her husband's increasing abusive behavior. On Saturday, February 19th, Sierra arrived at her parents' house in Cleveland, Georgia, where she spent the night. She reassured them that she wanted a divorce and wouldn't return to Indiana. On Sunday, February 20th, Sierra left her parents' house to pick up her son, Jackson, from her mother-in-law's house in Johns Creek, Georgia, about an hour away. Before leaving, Sierra sent a text to her cousin, Shelby Campbell, saying, "I'm at Xavier's mom's house. He won't give me Jackson, so I'm waiting to get him so I can leave." On Monday, February 21st, at 11:17 p.m., Sierra sent a text to her father, Nick, saying, "I'll be back in the morning if that's okay." Nick responded the next day, telling her it was okay and that she didn't have to ask. When Nick didn't hear back from Sierra, he reached out to her again. She replied that everything was okay and that she had been feeling a bit sick. Nick contacted her again on Wednesday to ask if she was feeling better, but he didn't receive a response. He sent another text on Thursday, February 24th, but there was still no response. By Friday, Sierra's loved ones were getting concerned because she hadn't responded, which was out of character for her. On the evening of Saturday, February 26th, Nick received a call from an unknown number based in Indiana. Initially, Nick didn't panic, assuming Sierra was still in Georgia, so he answered the call. The caller claimed to be a police officer and broke the news that Sierra had been reported missing. Apparently, her husband, Xavier, had filed a missing persons report. This revelation left the family in shock, as they had been under the impression that Sierra was still in Georgia, despite her uncharacteristic silence. What's especially puzzling, according to Shelby Campbell, is that Xavier never reached out to anyone to check on Sierra's whereabouts. He didn't call or notify anyone, which made the situation even more baffling. After speaking with the Carmel police, Sierra's father decided to call Xavier. In their conversation, Sierra's father pressured Xavier to tell the truth, reminding him that Sierra had warned her family that Xavier would be responsible if anything happened to her. Xavier responded by telling him to go to hell and then hung up the phone. After Nick called Xavier's father, who lived next to Sierra and Xavier in Carmel, the father claimed he never saw her. This was confirmed by a press release from the Carmel Police Department in Indiana on March 2nd. Xavier Breland had earlier reported Sierra missing to the police department on Saturday, February 26, 2022. During their investigation, detectives discovered a video recording that showed Sierra's last known location, her mother-in-law's house in Georgia, on February 24th at 7:07 p.m. According to the Carmel Police Department's official report, nothing unusual happened in the video. On February 25th, Sierra left her home in the Brookstone Park subdivision in Carmel, Indiana, around 1 p.m. to walk to a nearby store. At the time, she was wearing a black top and purple shorts, and the temperature was around 20 degrees. However, police reported that she never arrived at the store, and there was no surveillance video of her entering the store. Sierra's family was concerned when she vanished, leaving behind 3 phones, ID, and credit cards. They knew she'd never leave without telling them, especially not her 5-month-old son. Her mom, Kelly, revealed Sierra had confided in her about financial struggles and alleged abuse from her husband, who used their child to control her. Kelly was adamant Sierra wouldn't abandon her son, believing she'd be dead before doing so. On February 28, 2022, 2 days after reporting his wife Sierra missing, Xavier had an unexpected visit from the police at his doorstep. According to court documents, there was an accidental discharge of a firearm at a residence on Baldwin Lane. Xavier claimed to have been moving a Christmas tree in the garage when he heard the gunshot, prompting him to run outside. He then returned to the garage, found the gun, and unloaded it before calling the police to report the incident himself. The investigation revealed that there were 2 guns in his house. However, the police did not reveal whether they found any evidence linking Xavier to Sierra's disappearance. Nevertheless, it soon came to light that Xavier had a criminal past, having been convicted of felony burglary charges in 2005. It was also suspicious that Xavier waited a day to report his wife missing, claiming she had not returned home from a trip to the store. A few days after the police received the missing person report, Xavier was identified as a person of interest in his wife's disappearance. He was arrested on an unrelated charge due to an outstanding warrant for aggravated stalking in Coeur County. He was extradited to Georgia to face those charges. Court records show that Xavier had previously placed a tracking device inside a stuffed animal belonging to his daughter to track her mother, his ex-wife, as part of a custody battle between the former couple. On Friday, 2 weeks after Sierra's disappearance, a search operation was conducted in several neighborhoods in Johns Creek, involving police, volunteers, family, and friends. The main areas of focus were 2 neighborhoods along Medlock Bridge Road, which police believed Sierra might have passed through during her stay in Georgia. The search efforts included distributing flyers and setting up electronic signs at 2 locations along Kimball Bridge Road, seeking the public's assistance. The Johns Creek Police Department also contacted several commercial electronic sign companies to display Sierra's photo and information across Metro Atlanta. The family requested anyone who saw a white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan with Georgia license plate RMB 51869, which had a university law school frame around the plate, to contact the police. The vehicle was searched for evidence by forensic investigators and subsequently released. As Sierra was last seen at her mother-in-law's house in Georgia, police suspected that her disappearance might be linked to something that occurred at this location. Police traced the route Xavier took back to Indiana, but were unable to confirm whether Sierra was in the car. Notably, Xavier was the only person who got out of the white Volkswagen at gas stations and shops. The level of cooperation from Xavier's mother during the investigation remains unclear, but law enforcement officials confirmed that evidence was collected from the residence through a search warrant as part of their investigation. Johns Creek investigators, including forensic experts and cadaver dogs, searched the area for signs of a struggle or clues to the couple's disappearance. Despite a K-9 unit's involvement, no scent trail was found, and gathered evidence remains undisclosed due to the ongoing investigation. Xavier Breland was arrested in Georgia on March 16, 2022, for aggravated stalking. This stemmed from a 2021 incident where he hid a tracking device to stalk the mother of his child, who had a restraining order against him. He was later found not guilty, but arrested again and extradited to Indiana for unlawful possession of a firearm. Xavier Breland asked a judge to lower his bond to an affordable amount for his mother. The court initially set it at $35,000, but prosecutors requested $50,000. After Breland appealed, the judge set it at $100,000. He was released in February 2023 after posting bail. Sierra's disappearance remains a mystery despite extensive searches. She was last seen at a store, and investigations have pinpointed several potential locations. The vast search area spans millions of acres of state and federal land, parks, and undeveloped areas in Georgia, plus thousands of acres of railroad and utility easements. According to Kelly Breland, law enforcement has gathered evidence and statements from multiple states, but these are like puzzle pieces without a complete picture. Some items were removed from Xavier's mother's home, as revealed in court documents related to a civil case filed by Xavier's mother against Xavier's sister. As part of their search, crime scene investigators cut and removed the carpet and mattress from Xavier's mother's home on April 21, 2022, according to documents from the familial civil dispute. After Xavier Breland's arrest on March 1st, 5-month-old Jackson was placed into state care. Since then, Jackson's grandparents, Nick and Kelly Miller, have been able to be with the infant and are working to bring the baby back home to Georgia. Past year, numerous searches focused on specific areas, but no leads on the new mom's disappearance. Police reconstruct events, distribute flyers, and use electronic signs to raise awareness. Sierra, 5'7", 120 pounds, blonde hair with distinct tattoos. She was last seen in a white 2017 VW Tiguan with GA plate RMB 5869. If seen in Feb, contact authorities. Xavier is the only person of interest that police have publicly named in connection with Sierra's disappearance. But so far, no charges have been filed against him. Despite this, Sierra's family remains convinced that Xavier knows what happened to her and is the only one who can provide the answers they need to bring closure and allow Sierra to rest in peace. Kelly Breland, a family member, believes that Sierra's body might be located in one of 4 states: Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, or Indiana. She is appealing to outdoorsmen and fishermen in these states to be vigilant and report any information they might have to the authorities. In a separate development, Sierra's parents have been granted custody of the couple's child. It's worth noting that Xavier Breland was previously arrested and released on bail for illegal possession of firearms. His trial was set to take place on December 28, 2023, but he failed to appear in court, and his current whereabouts are unknown. As a result, a rearrest warrant has been issued, and law enforcement is working to track him down. This recent development adds another layer of complexity to the already puzzling case of Sierra's disappearance. Xavier Breland, a 6'1" tall, 160-pound black man with brown hair and green eyes, has gone missing. There is a warrant out for his arrest, and the FBI has joined the search for the missing woman, Sierra, whose body has not been found. The disappearances of both Xavier and Sierra have raised many unanswered questions. Sierra's mother, Kelly Breland, believes her daughter was afraid of Xavier and did not plan to return to Indiana with him. With both individuals now missing, the case has become even more urgent. The trial related to Xavier's gun charge has been postponed multiple times. Law enforcement and Sierra's family are now seeking the public's help in finding Xavier and Sierra, hoping to shed light on the mysterious circumstances surrounding their disappearances. The case of Valerie Tiemann. Valerie Tiemann was born on December 31st, 1981, in Salem, Virginia. Valerie Joy Harmon was the child of Sarah Jean Sampson Harmon and Jean Allen Harmon. She grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie then earned her cosmetology degree from Bob Jones University. Known for her warm, friendly smile and outgoing personality, Valerie was passionate about drama and speech. She enjoyed music, playing the piano and flute. Using her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in salons, spas, and pageants, helping others look and feel their best. Valerie met Matt through a mutual friend when she was 22. Despite their contrasting personalities, Valerie was outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more withdrawn. They made it work. The couple got married in 2004 and initially lived harmoniously in Matt's small house after their honeymoon. However, Valerie's parents soon noticed changes in her behavior. Matt tightly controlled their finances, forcing Valerie to open a separate bank account to save personally. As time passed, Matt's behavior worsened as he sought to control every aspect of Valerie's life and blamed her for all their problems. Valerie endured much emotional pain, but eventually reached her breaking point. After 10 years, she divorced Matt, seeking a fresh start. Luke Tiemann brought a fresh start to Valerie's life, helping her put her past problems behind her. With his 10-year Army background, including service in Iraq and Afghanistan, Valerie saw him as a reliable and loving partner. Her relatives noticed a significant change in her as she became cheerful and smiling once again, just like 10 years prior. The couple got married on June 6, 2014, and began living at Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents resided in South Carolina. After visiting her family in South Carolina, Luke and Valerie returned to Maine in August 2016. On August 24, 2016, Valerie's mother, Sarah Jean Harmon, had her last conversation with her daughter through text messages. Around that time, Luke had started chatting with a woman on Facebook and was seen with her by several people. On the night of August 24th, Luke and the woman were intimate, and it appears that Valerie discovered their infidelity that night. On August 25th, 2016, Valerie called Luke 31 times within a 5-hour span. A mutual friend of the couple contacted Valerie via Messenger, informing her that Luke was involved with other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie responded with several messages, expressing her heartbreak and conveying that God had a plan, and that Luke would never find a better woman than her, and that he had lost her. On August 26, 2016, Luke Tiemann moved in with the woman he was having an affair with, claiming to her that his wife Valerie had left him for another man. Meanwhile, Valerie's parents, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon, were growing concerned because Valerie, who had been calling them every week, had suddenly stopped responding to their calls and texts. After a week of trying to reach her, they decided to contact Luke, asking how he and Valerie were doing. The next day, Luke replied, saying they were fine and that he loved her very much. However, another 13 days went by with no word from Valerie, prompting her parents to reach out to Luke's father for help. To their shock, Luke's father told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and that they had not seen her. He even asked what to do with her belongings. When Alan confronted Luke about why he hadn't told them about Valerie's disappearance, Luke claimed he was waiting for Valerie to contact her parents herself, as he didn't want to speak poorly of her. He repeated the story that Valerie had left him for another man, but her parents knew it was untrue. It was out of character for Valerie, and they were certain she would have reached out to them because she knew they would worry. On September 9, 2016, Alan filed a report with the Fairfield Police Department stating Valerie was missing. The detectives launched an investigation, which began with a visit to Luke Tiemann's parents, where Valerie had been living with her husband. During the visit, they spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel Tiemann, but she claimed to have no knowledge of their whereabouts. As a result, the detectives left without gaining any new information. Valerie's parents had always thought it was difficult for their daughter to live with Laurel, who they saw as overbearing. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed all of her belongings into garbage bags. This action clearly reflected Laurel's attitude towards her daughter-in-law. She seemed unconcerned about Valerie's well-being and was primarily motivated by a desire to clear the house of her belongings. The police were searching for Luke Tiemann to ask him some questions, but he was nowhere to be found. They went to his home, but he wasn't there. And his parents claimed they didn't know his whereabouts. However, 5 days after Valerie's disappearance, Luke unexpectedly contacted the police himself, stating that he was aware they wanted to speak with him. During the conversation, the detectives asked him about Valerie and the last time he saw her. Luke's response was peculiar. He explained that, about 2 weeks prior, he and Valerie had stopped by the local Walmart to purchase some groceries. While he went inside the store, Valerie stayed in the car. When he finished shopping and returned to the vehicle, Valerie was gone. Luke claimed that he tried to reach her by calling and texting, offering to take her back. He also revealed that his marriage to Valerie was on the verge of collapse. According to him, Valerie had mentioned another man during a conversation, leading him to believe she was having an affair. Despite this, Luke didn't know the man's identity or address, and he assumed Valerie had left him for this unknown individual. Valerie's family, however, insisted she had never mentioned anyone else besides Luke Tiemann in her life. The police made a public appeal through the media, releasing a photo of Valerie and asking anyone who had seen her in the recent weeks to come forward with information for the detectives. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance from the Walmart parking lot, including her belongings being found in garbage bags, seemed suspicious. It was also unclear why Luke Tiemann, Valerie's husband, had made no effort to search for her, possibly due to being preoccupied with another woman. Investigators visited the Walmart where Luke and Valerie had been on the day of her disappearance, where they reviewed the surveillance footage. Despite searching for over an hour, they found no evidence of Luke, his red pickup truck, or Valerie on any of the recordings. This discovery revealed that Luke had lied to the police and that he was hiding something. The investigators decided to interview Luke in person, but they didn't disclose all the information they had obtained. They suspected that he might contradict himself or alter his story if he knew what they knew. Luke's open affair with Billie Joe Goodman didn't go unnoticed by anyone. While he admitted to cheating on Valerie, he claimed it was an attempt to heal from their recent breakup. Billie Joe, however, had a string of failed relationships behind her, but when she met Luke, she believed he was the one with whom she could build a stable future. This new development led investigators to a crucial question. Did Valerie pose a threat to Luke and Billie Joe's budding relationship? Was it possible that the couple wanted to start anew, and Valerie's presence was an obstacle they decided to eliminate to ensure their plans went undisrupted? The police interviewed Billie Joe, who claimed she thought Luke had divorced his wife. When questioned, she denied any knowledge of Valerie Tiemann's disappearance. Meanwhile, a local informant tipped off the police about a driver's license found in a parking lot near Billie Joe's home, and it belonged to Valerie. This discovery raised suspicions, as it seemed unlikely that Valerie would abandon her belongings and identification to run off with someone else. On September 19, 2016, Luke Tiemann gave an interview to News Center, Maine, 10 days after Valerie's father, Alan, had filed a missing persons report with the police. During the interview, Luke told reporters that he and Valerie had gone to Walmart, but Valerie was not in the car when he returned. At the time, he was unaware that the Walmart CCTV footage did not corroborate his account. Police dogs trained to detect human remains were brought in to search the last known place where Valerie lived. The search plan involved checking the house, the land, and the stream. After about 5 minutes, a police dog picked up a scent in the woods behind the Tiemann family house. An officer began digging the soil with his hands and found a shoe sticking out of the ground. Other officers, wearing gloves, joined in to help dig. They eventually uncovered a woman's body, wrapped in a blanket and buried with a collection of unusual items. These items included a bag of potato chips, a bottle of Gucci perfume, a package of sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, a mason jar, a handwritten note, and a wedding ring. The ring was discovered later when evidence was being prepared for trial. Sergeant Scott Bryant, chief of Maine's evidence response team, was processing the contents of the mason jar, which included dirt, flower stems, and twigs, when he heard a thud and found the ring. Although it was not specified who the ring belonged to, or whether it was a man's or woman's, Bryant noted that the ring was much larger than his own wedding ring. The body was transported to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon received the devastating news that every parent fears the most. The body discovered behind the Tiemann family house was identified as their daughter, Valerie. Valerie lived in the house with Luke, as well as his parents and younger brother Sam. The detectives searched the barn and found landscaping tools that belonged to Sam, which were used to dig the burial site where Valerie's body was found. They also discovered a device related to illegal substance use. Further investigation revealed that Sam Tiemann had a history of using illegal substances, which Valerie had confided in her parents about during her visit to South Carolina. The police had to investigate whether Sam Tiemann was involved in Valerie's death. During a search of Luke's parents' bedroom, investigators discovered a .45 caliber handgun that Luke Tiemann had purchased in 2015. Despite this, Luke's parents claimed to have had no knowledge of Valerie's burial near their house, which seems unlikely. Around the time Valerie's body was found, investigators also discovered Luke with his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke Tiemann was arrested and taken in for questioning. He told investigators that Valerie had died from an overdose on August 25th, about a month prior, due to her use of illegal substances. According to Luke, he didn't inform Valerie's parents about her death because he wanted to spare them the knowledge of her drug use. Instead of calling 911, he left her body in bed until evening, then wrapped her in a blanket, added a note, and buried her in the woods behind the house with the help of his brother Sam. According to Luke, Valerie did not have any physical injuries before she died. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was not telling the truth. Although Valerie's blood showed no traces of banned substances, it did contain prescription drugs. But that was not the most astonishing finding. Valerie died from 2 gunshot wounds, one to the head and the other to the neck. The ballistics examination indicated that the bullets removed from Valerie's body came from a .45 caliber handgun. Significantly, this handgun matched the one found by investigators in Luke's parents' bedroom during a search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year prior, claiming it was for his father. Despite this, he denied knowing that Valerie had been shot. Luke Tiemann, 32, has been charged with the murder of his 34-year-old wife, Valerie Tiemann. Although his parents and younger brother were investigated, no evidence was found to implicate them. Luke claimed that his brother, Sam, helped him bury Valerie's body, but the police found that Sam was not at home at the time, and it remains unclear whether Luke's parents were aware of or involved in Valerie's death. It is noteworthy that they did not report hearing 2 gunshots on April 2, 2018. The trial began in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine, with opening statements marking the start of a 5-day trial. Luke pleaded not guilty, arguing that he had been framed. He claimed that he would not have left incriminating evidence, such as an engagement ring and a note, near the body. But forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke Tiemann. A computer forensics expert testified, revealing that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day the police believe she died. The detective explained how tracking cell phone usage can help determine an individual's location at the time of a call. Valerie made 31 calls to Luke on the same day he allegedly spent time with his new girlfriend, Billy Joe. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted around 13 minutes. The police believe he was at home when the call ended. The morning after Valerie's disappearance, a woman sent a message to Valerie's phone accusing Luke of cheating on her. This was the last time the woman was heard from. Luke's defense team questioned the authenticity of these phone records. In court, Luke's younger brother, Sam Tiemann, testified against him. Luke had told the police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied any involvement, claiming he was working 2 hours away at the time and had his work log as proof. Sam told the court that he confronted Luke after hearing he had implicated him, and Luke responded by saying, "What else do you do with a dead body?" The police continued to press Luke about who shot Valerie, even suggesting that his brother Sam or their parents might be involved. Luke insisted that they were incapable of such an act. The officers wondered if Luke might have blacked out due to his PTSD, which he had previously claimed would sometimes cause him to become enraged and forgetful afterwards. Several witnesses called by the prosecutor testified in court about the private lives of Luke and Valerie Tiemann. They gave detailed accounts of how the couple frequently used significant amounts of illegal drugs. Additionally, they stated that Luke had informed people he was getting a divorce around the same time Valerie went missing. Luke's former girlfriend, Jackie Spencer, revealed to the jury that she had a close relationship with the couple and had even served as the maid of honor at their wedding. She stated that she had personally witnessed Valerie and Luke using various illegal drugs together. Furthermore, she testified that Luke had begun sending her numerous text messages around the time Valerie vanished, suggesting that he may have been interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with her. The jury was shown evidence from the crime scene, which included a video that depicted the approximately 3-minute walk from where Valerie's body was discovered to the Tiemann's home. The video footage revealed an overgrown, all-terrain vehicle trail winding through a thickly forested area, a common feature found behind many rural homes in Maine. The defense team, representing Luke, raised objections to certain pieces of evidence, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun discovered in one of the rooms of the home. They contended that the prosecution had failed to establish ownership of these items, suggesting that someone else in the household may have had access to them. During the trial, Luke Tiemann acknowledged that he had changed his story multiple times, alleging that detectives had coerced him into providing false testimony. He insisted that he had no reason to kill his wife, and that there was no DNA evidence connecting him to the crime scene. The prosecutors, however, argued that Tiemann was the only person who could have harmed Valerie, and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate before finding Tiemann guilty. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her grief and outrage, denouncing Tiemann as an evil-hearted man who still refused to accept responsibility for his actions and demanded a life sentence. In contrast, Tiemann's mother begged the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with compassion. Ultimately, Tiemann received a 55-year prison sentence, which was longer than his family had hoped. Despite later changing his testimony again while incarcerated, this did not have a positive impact on his case. The case of Jirish. On November 30, 2003, Shuba, a 27-year-old law student, became engaged to Jirish, a software engineer. Her father, a respected lawyer in Bengaluru, had a stellar reputation in the legal community. As his daughter grew older, he worried about her marital prospects. Consequently, he arranged her marriage to Jirish, a suitable match with a good job at a prominent multinational company. The two families had known each other for years, which further solidified the union. Confident that Jirish would provide a secure future for his daughter, Shuba's father gave his blessing for the engagement, set to take place on November 30, 2003. with a wedding planned for April 2004. However, 3 days after the engagement, on December 3, 2003, Shuba suggested they celebrate with dinner at a restaurant that evening. Girish was thrilled, as this was the first time his fiancée had taken the initiative to plan a night out. Before dinner, Girish took Shuba to his office to introduce her to his colleagues. Afterwards, they headed to a restaurant on Old Airport Road for dinner. After the meal, around 9:30 p.m., Girish and Shuba began their journey home. But on the way, Shuba asked Girish to stop near the airport's landing strip so they could watch the planes take off and land. Girish agreed, parking his scooter to the side, and they stood together, enjoying the planes and each other's company. Suddenly, 3 boys on motorcycles appeared, attacking Girish. Shuba was left alone to face the 3 armed boys, and she desperately shouted for help. Unfortunately, they were alone at that moment, and the 3 boys brutally beat Girish before fleeing. Shuba persisted in shouting for help, and her cries were fortunately heard by a passing car driver who stopped to assist her and Girish. With great effort, both the car owner and Shuba managed to get Girish into their vehicle and drive him to a nearby hospital. The doctor admitted Girish and immediately began his treatment. Meanwhile, Shuba notified both her and Girish's families about the accident, and within a short time, both families arrived at the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts throughout the night, they were ultimately unable to save Girish, and on December 4th, they pronounced him deceased. Since this was a clear-cut case of murder, Girish's father rushed to the nearby police station that same day. He recounted to the police how his son and his fiancée had gone out for dinner the previous night, and how, while they were standing at a landing spot near the airport, Girish was attacked, ultimately leading to his death. The police promptly took over the case and began their investigation by questioning Shuba, the sole eyewitness to Girish's murder. Given her distress, she had been inconsolable since learning of Girish's death. The police approached her gently. However, Shuba's account matched the one Girish's father had already provided, prompting the police to launch a thorough probe of both the crime scene and Girish's background. They even explored the possibility that Girish had personal enemies, but their efforts yielded no concrete leads to crack the case. According to reports, the police were unable to find any CCTV footage in the area, which was largely deserted and lacked residential cameras at the time. Consequently, the investigators turned to Girish and Shuba's engagement video as a potential source of leads. Their motive was to investigate whether someone close to Girish might have been involved in his murder, given that only their families were aware of the couple's trip. The investigative officer meticulously examined the engagement video, focusing on the behavior of their families and relatives. However, no suspicious behavior was detected among them. Undeterred, the officer re-watched the video, this time concentrating on Girish and Shuba's neighbors and other guests in attendance. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no positive results. In the midst of the investigation, the officer took note of Shuba's facial expressions. Unlike what one would expect, she didn't seem happy and was making an effort to keep her distance from Girish. Initially, the officer had focused on the behavior and expressions of Girish and Shuba's relatives, almost neglecting Shuba herself. But after seeing Shuba's unhappy expressions and attempts to distance herself from Girish in a brief clip, he decided to review the entire engagement video again. Upon re-examining the video, the officer observed that during the ring ceremony, Shuba looked visibly sad while sitting with Girish and was consistently trying to create space between them. This struck the investigating officer as unusual, as newly engaged couples are typically ecstatic. Shuba's evident unhappiness raised his suspicions, but he also recognized that relying solely on a video wasn't enough to take action against her. Therefore, he decided to investigate Shuba's call records. Although it was unusual for the police to use this technology in 2003, as it was still relatively new in India at the time, The officer's interest in technology led him to pursue this avenue. In fact, mobile phones were a rarity in India back then, but Shubha's wealthy family had made it possible for her to own one. Upon obtaining her call records, it was revealed that on December 3rd, Shubha had made repeated calls to a single number. The police then traced the number back to a boy named Arun Verma. The police then delved deeper to uncover who Arun Verma was and what his connection to Shubha was. They soon discovered that both Arun and Shubha attended the same college, with Shubha being 2 years his senior. This new information prompted the officer to track their locations on December 3rd. Shubha's location was found near the airport, as she was with Girish. However, when tracing Arun's location, the police found that he was also near the airport, following Shubha to every location she visited. This heightened the police's suspicion, and they subsequently tracked down Arun Verma and summoned him to the police station for questioning. When the police questioned Arun about his whereabouts on December 3rd, he claimed to have been out of town for work. The instant he made this statement, the investigative officer was convinced that Arun was lying and would never admit the truth if asked directly. So they released him, but secretly tapped his phone beforehand. The officer suspected that Arun and Shubha might be involved in Girish's death. However, they couldn't present them as guilty in court based solely on their alibis and call records from that day. Therefore, they put Arun's phone under surveillance, believing that if he was involved in the murder, he would eventually incriminate himself. Upon returning home from the police station, Arun's first call was to Shubha. Over the phone, Arun informed Shubha that the police had questioned him about Girish's death. Shubha asked if he had disclosed anything to the police. Arun reassured her that he had kept quiet and successfully misled the police, telling them he was out of town on December 3rd. When the police heard the recording, their suspicions were fully corroborated, leading to the immediate arrest of Arun and Shubha. At the station, the police presented them with the call recording, call detail records, and location history. Initially, both attempted to deceive the police, but eventually, Arun's nerve failed, and he confessed to the police that they had indeed murdered Girish. The unfolding story stunned everyone. The 19-year-old Arun and 27-year-old Shubha had been secretly involved for the past 2 years. It was astonishing to learn that Arun, still in his teenage years, was deeply in love with a woman 7 years his senior. Reports suggest that Shubha also desired to marry Arun, but their dream remained unrealized. Shubha's father discovered their secret relationship and disapproved of Arun, who was significantly younger than Shubha. As a result, he hastily arranged Shubha's engagement to Girish, which took place on November 30th. However, Shubha was unhappy with this arrangement. Despite Girish being educated and financially stable, Shubha found his simplicity and modest lifestyle unappealing and felt he wasn't a suitable match for her. During the investigation, it emerged that Shubha had confided in her beautician at the time of her engagement, revealing her intention to either flee before the wedding or harm Girish. Coerced into the engagement by her father, Shubha had now devised a plan with Arun to eliminate Girish. This explained her repeated calls to Arun, who agreed to carry out her plan. With the help of his cousin Dinesh, Arun hired a local thug named Vinay. Shubha planned to lure Girish out of the house on December 3rd, pretending to take him out for dinner. On their way back, she would take him to a secluded spot near the airport's landing strip, where it would be easy to carry out the murder. According to this plan, on December 3rd, after dinner, Shubha expressed her desire to watch airplanes take off. He agreed to his fiancée's request, and they proceeded to the landing spot. Throughout their journey, Shubha kept Arun informed about her location through regular calls and messages. Shortly after, Arun, Dinesh, and Venkatesa arrived at the flight landing spot. Dinesh and Venkatesa then launched a brutal attack on Girish, striking him on the head with an iron rod. Girish collapsed instantly, bleeding profusely from his head injury and losing consciousness. Once the four were convinced that Jirish was on the brink of death, Aaron and his companions fled the scene, abandoning the iron rod in the nearby bushes. After a significant period following Jirish's injury, Shuba sought help, and the rest of the story unfolded. Despite this, Jirish's killers managed to evade the police for nearly 50 days until Shuba and her accomplices were arrested on January 25, 2004, when the motive behind Jirish's murder and the identities of his killers were finally revealed. The news of the incident spread rapidly throughout the state media. The police gathered all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared their case file, which was then presented in court. Although the case languished in the regular court for a lengthy period, it was eventually transferred to a fast-track court. Even in the fast-track court, the trial continued from 2007 to 2010. In May 2010, the fast-track court sentenced Shuba, Aaron, and their companions to life imprisonment. However, in July 2010, Shuba filed a bail application with the Karnataka High Court, which upheld the lower court's decision and rejected her bail plea. With no other option, Shuba then filed her bail application with the Supreme Court in August 2014, and the Supreme Court granted her bail for a limited period. The investigative officer who cracked this murder case by reviewing a video recording of the incident deserves appreciation. However, if Shuba had mustered the courage to confide in her father that she didn't like Jirish and wouldn't be happy with him in her life, perhaps Jirish would be alive today. Even if Shuba had shared her concerns with Jirish, maybe he could have persuaded her father. The tragic irony of this story is that by the time Girish's killers were sentenced to life imprisonment, Girish's father had already passed away, leaving no one to find closure. With that, the Jirish murder case finally comes to a close. The case of Christina Carlin Croft. Christina Rose Carlin Croft was born on November 11, 1983, in a coastal town in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Croft and Deanne Carlin. She had a natural flair for being in front of the camera, which would eventually shape her career path. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City for several years. However, her ultimate dream was to become a model, and her determination paid off. She eventually found success in the modeling industry. In her promotional material, Christina revealed that she enjoyed participating in photo shoots featuring high-end lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend she met on a 3-day Maxim magazine shoot, Christina was a charming and beautiful woman with a great sense of humor. With dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the essence of a fashion model. Christina had always dreamed of being on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, she met Alex Yurtielli. They started dating soon after, and Alex became her supportive partner, never opposing her career choices. After a long-term relationship, they got engaged. The couple stayed together until Christina's death. Christina achieved her goal of becoming Cyber Girl of the Month for May 2009 and was invited to the Playboy Mansion. She attended parties at the mansion, gaining entry into the glamorous world. This success marked the peak of her career, and her ambitions soared, especially after meeting Hugh Hefner, whose attention was hard to capture. However, despite this, Christina failed to become a Playboy magazine model. Thousands of girls send their photos to the magazine, but only one is chosen. At 26, Christina was considered too old for the magazine, which typically features younger models. This setback affected her confidence, but she continued modeling. Her extensive portfolio included work with Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, Vanity Fair, and many others. To further her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, not all brands were willing to work with her due to her explicit photo shoot. Christina's career began to decline after her appearance in Playboy, ultimately coming to an end. Overcoming this challenging period in her life was undoubtedly tough, but she always had Alex's support. Known for her elegant appearance, captivating beauty, and scandalous behavior, Christina made headlines in 2016 for causing a scene at the Smith, a restaurant in New York. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Kraft, 34, and her male companion got into an argument with the manager, Sergei Anakin, on March 6th over their bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager intervened. Witnesses claim Christina was drunk and falsely accused the manager of pushing her. But surveillance footage proved otherwise. She allegedly struck someone in the neck around 10 p.m., causing redness and significant pain. Christina was charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, the DA offered her a deal, and the charges were dropped on the condition that she remains trouble-free for 6 months. Christina has always had a fondness for Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, which she considered a safe haven. With this in mind, Alex purchased an apartment in Ardmore in 2018 and relocated to Pennsylvania with her. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore wasn't as safe as she had thought. On August 18, 2018, she contacted the police to report a robbery. Earlier that evening, Christina had spent time at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night were hazy. The next thing she recalled was waking up the following morning, feeling groggy and suspecting that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. She had no recollection of how she got home or if anyone had accompanied her. At the time, Alex was away on a business trip. Feeling uneasy and anxious, Christina repeatedly expressed her concerns about her safety. During the investigation, police obtained CCTV footage showing a car arriving at Christina's apartment around 3 a.m. Unconscious in the back seat, Christina was being driven by a thief who stole her keys, entered her home, and plundered over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer bags, pillows, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The thief remained in the apartment for about an hour and a half before returning to the car, helping Christina inside, and then leaving her in the hallway. They placed the keys back in her purse and drove away. The police swiftly identified the perpetrator using a credit card statement. The driver was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. He was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with Virginia license plates. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, which was confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. While the police were still searching for Andre Melton to recover Christina's stolen items, a far more serious crime took place. Just 4 days later, on August 22nd, 2018, Alex Celli called the police, asking them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Kraft, as he was unable to contact her and was on his way home. Christina wasn't answering her calls or texts. Upon arriving home, Alex found the apartment door locked from the inside. He then checked the security system, revealing that someone had opened the front door and the balcony door during the night. The police were called to the address and had to force entry by breaking down the front door, which was locked from the inside. Upon entering the apartment, they were immediately met with signs of a crime scene, including visible blood. A body lay on the bed, covered with a blanket. Lifting the blanket, they found a woman who had been severely beaten. Unfortunately, it was Christina Carlin Kraft, and she was already dead. Her body showed signs of blows all over, and her nose was broken. There was also a strangulation mark around her neck. It was later discovered that Christina had been strangled with her own sweatpants. When the detectives identified the victim, they had to break the devastating news to Alex, who was waiting outside. His beloved Christina was dead. This shocking revelation sparked immediate suspicion, as the people closest to the victim are often implicated in such cases. The police did not dismiss the possibility that Alex might be the perpetrator. Alex and Christina had a long history together, and anything could have transpired between them. It was Alex who had contacted the police station, expressing concern for Christina's safety, only for her to be found dead soon after. These events seemed too coincidental, It was possible that Alex had orchestrated the scenario to divert suspicion away from himself. The investigators requested that Alex accompany them to the police station to answer some questions. He agreed without hesitation. During the questioning, Alex explained that he had an urgent work commitment in New York on August 21st and had planned to return. The following night, August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to bid her good night, but she didn't answer. Given her habitual wakefulness at this hour, Alex grew anxious. He made several more calls, but Christina remained unresponsive. After reviewing the security system, he discovered suspicious activity in the apartment that night, prompting him to relinquish his business and rush back to Ardmore. After hearing Alex's story, the police no longer believed he was responsible for Christina's murder. His alibi checked out, and he couldn't have been in two places at once. They cleared him as a suspect, but the question remained: who killed Christina? Who would want her dead? The investigators looked into Christina's report of a robbery 4 days before her murder, suspecting a connection between the two crimes. This led them to Andre Melton, the thief who stole from Christina's apartment. Maybe he returned to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Perhaps he discovered she had reported him to the police and decided to take revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was found, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his address, however, they discovered he was no longer there. Despite his absence, they did find some of Christina's belongings still at the location. The police also managed to obtain surveillance footage from the night of the crime, which showed Christina leaving her apartment, then returning a few hours later with an unknown man. The footage was recorded at 3:08 a.m., and surprisingly, the man was not Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage revealed that the unknown man did not leave Christina's apartment again. The police later found an explanation for this using CCTV cameras on the streets of Ardmore. They discovered that Christina had visited a Philadelphia bar before returning to her apartment. Investigators reviewed the CCTV footage from the bar, which showed Christina meeting a man who later hugged her. This was the same man she had returned to her apartment with. After leaving the bar, Christina and her new friend were involved in an altercation. In the days that followed, detectives worked to reconstruct Christina's movements on the day she died, gathering data to piece together the events leading up to the crime. The police quickly ruled out Melton as a suspect, as he was not with Christina on the day of her death. However, it remained unclear whether her death was connected to the earlier robbery or simply a coincidence. On August 25th, the police received a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who had driven Christina and her companion that night, came forward. According to Sanford, Christina and the man had hailed him down rather than using the taxi app and had negotiated the fare. Sanford reported that the couple seemed affectionate and did not arouse his suspicion. When they arrived at their destination, Christina got out and directed Sanford where to go. It turned out that she didn't have any cash and offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford declined. Her friend then offered him $100 to wait for 10 to 15 minutes while they went inside. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her companion had returned. The couple, Christina and Alex, entered their second-floor apartment around 3 a.m. About an hour later, at 4 a.m., Christina made a call to her cousin, but she didn't speak. Instead, her cousin heard a man's voice in the background, warning Christina not to call the police. The call abruptly ended before the cousin could gather more information. It remains unclear why the cousin didn't call 911 after hearing this. The police were able to piece together the crime's timeline thanks to the door sensors in the apartment, which recorded exact times for each door opening. The records showed that someone opened the door at 3:08 a.m. and again at 5:10 a.m. Around the same time, the system detected that someone had opened the sliding glass door on the balcony, which explained why the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment, leading them to assume that the perpetrator had jumped off the balcony. Police sought public's help through media, releasing surveillance images of two men, Andre Melton and the one at Christina's apartment the night she died. In a surprising turn of events, Andre Melton, whose whereabouts were still unknown to the detectives, contacted the police himself. He confessed to stealing valuables from Christina, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. The police were perplexed by this unexpected call, as they were still unable to establish a definitive link between the theft and Christina's death. It was possible that this was all part of a strategy devised by the two suspects. It seemed that Melton's intention was not to surrender to the authorities, but to proclaim his innocence in Christina's murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects featured in the released pictures. He shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. The caller revealed that the suspect had previously chased a woman in Love Park, Philadelphia, and followed her into the local family court building, where he molested her and became aggressive, shouting and causing destruction. The incident led to a 2-hour stay in a psychiatric hospital, costing $70. However, the suspect was admitted without being identified, as no one wanted to deal with him. The police were left with a mystery on their hands. The caller then provided even more critical information, stating that the suspect bragged about recently strangling a woman, taking great pleasure and satisfaction from the act. Upon hearing this, investigators strongly believed that they had found the killer of Christina Carlin Craft. The police station received another call from a man who claimed to be a relative of the suspect from Philadelphia. He identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, who had previously served a prison sentence for robbery. Harris was released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's death. After conducting a thorough background check, investigators concluded that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no connection and had never crossed paths before. Therefore, the police ruled out any possibility of a link between the two crimes. Furthermore, the police gained access to Harris's phone records, which revealed that he had sent several messages on August 22nd. One of the texts mentioned that he had met an attractive woman and was planning to visit her apartment on August 28th. With this new evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris and deemed it crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible, as they were unsure of his next move. However, tracking Harris down proved to be a challenge, as he had left no trace. Investigators finally got a break when they contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, and learned that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they discovered that Harris was already on the bus when they spoke with his sister. The police realized they wouldn't be able to catch up with him, leaving the Pittsburgh police as their last hope. It was essential to be in the right place at the right time to apprehend Harris. The police investigating Christina's death reached out to the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They provided the exact time of the bus's arrival in Pittsburgh and sent over a photo of Harris. The fugitive task force then set up an ambush, blocking all potential escape routes, ready to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. Shortly after, one of the employees spotted the bus approaching. They allowed Harris time to calmly disembark, avoiding any sudden moves that might provoke a reaction. About 10 minutes later, a policeman intercepted him. I saw his eyes scanning, searching for an escape route, but it was too late. According to a Pittsburgh police officer, when the officer asked Harris to identify himself, he provided a false name. He was subsequently arrested and taken into custody at the police station. Detectives from Philadelphia traveled to Pittsburgh to question Harris. They requested that he recount the events of the night he met Christina, Harris claimed to have seen her on multiple occasions at bars and nightclubs in Philadelphia. Christina Carling Craft was struggling to adjust to her new life in New York, which had drastically altered her daily routine and environment. As a result, she would frequently visit bars, cafes, and nightclubs, but she was always by herself since Alex was constantly working, and she had not yet formed new friendships. It was common for men at these establishments to approach her, taking advantage of her solo status. Harris was one of those men. Harris claimed he was drunk and high on illegal drugs when he met Christina. They had a drink, then went to her place, where they drank more and had consensual sex. Harris demanded $1,200, but Christina refused, sparking a heated argument. Harris said she hit him with a wine bottle, so he hit her back, causing her to fall. When she tried to call the police, he strangled her with sweatpants until she passed out. Jonathan Harris's story had inconsistencies. A toxicology report on Christina's body found only alcohol, contradicting his claim of a single hit. When confronted, he admitted lying. Initially, Harris denied involvement, but later confessed to beating her, saying, "I panicked," and covering her because he didn't want to see her. When the trial began, Harris, despite having confessed to the crime, pleaded not guilty, like many other criminals who later retract their confessions. However, the investigators had assembled a substantial amount of evidence, making it difficult for Harris and his lawyer to build a strong defense. They anticipated a sentence of 22 to 40 years for third-degree murder and attempted to avoid a life sentence. Nevertheless, the prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that convinced the court that the crime was premeditated. During the trial, the court heard testimony from a man who had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic. This same man had previously contacted the police. He revealed that Jonathan Harris had earlier confessed to him, stating, "There's nothing like squeezing somebody and feeling the last breath leave their body." In August 2019, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 22 to 45 years. The judge added the extra decades to ensure that Harris would never be freed, sending a message to future governors or pardon boards. In December 2018, Philadelphia police arrested Andre Melton for the robbery of Christina Carling Craft's apartment. In March 2020, the court sentenced him to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, which means Melton will be under court supervision for a total of 7 years. Before learning his fate, Melton said, "I would like to apologize to the family for any grief or pain that I caused. I am not the bad person the district attorney is trying to make me out to be."